All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is Discovering Foundation with SASS for Drupal. Thanks for coming. Just a little bit about me. My name is Brian Krall. I'm a senior front-end developer at Duo Consulting. And just like we said in the keynote this morning, we are hiring front-end developers. So if you're looking, come talk to me after this. I'm bkrall on Twitter and broiler on D.O. I was also bkrall on D.O before, but then one of my coworkers told me that you have to have like a cool name, and that's what he calls me, so I went with that. I'm a member of 1871, which is the tech accelerator startup scene in the Merch Mart. I said like a designer's membership. I'm not affiliated with a company there, so I work for Duo. And I also just have a blog at sideproject.io, and that's all front-end design stuff. This is my dog Kirby. A little bit more about me. He's a golden retriever, 2 years old, and he has no idea what Foundation is. So just to kind of get a gauge of like who you guys are, how many of you are like front-end developers? Awesome. Okay. And how many of you have like used Foundation before? And what about like used Foundation for Drupal? Okay. Excellent. So I guess the first place to start is why would you use a front-end framework at all? And we kind of came to this after going to DrupalCon Portland. I saw like a Lalabot talk, and they were talking. It was called like the Zen of prototyping in the browser, and they were talking about Observe Foundation, which is this tool where they could like rapidly prototype and get things in front of clients really quickly. And it just sounded really good, and we did some research on it, and we found that it fit pretty well for us. So we started with Sassoon, which is more of like a starter kit. It's just like it's kind of where D8 is going a little bit, which is awesome. But it makes everything HTML5, and there's like a grid system built in, and it's really good. But it's just kind of starting from scratch, which is fine. But we really wanted to work faster and more efficiently because it's agency life and we have a lot of projects coming at us. So we wanted to kind of be able to work really efficiently but not sacrifice like, the quality of our work or have everything look the same. And also Foundation has like a tested, really proven great community like Drupal, like you guys, like us. And it also kind of allowed us to promote better coding standards and maintenance. Like when you have every project just kind of has the same groundwork laid for it, and we kind of found like the more that you use it, the better you get at it, the faster you are with it. And you can also do responsive prototypes. And the key with that is the responsive prototype is going to be before you layer in the complexity of Drupal. But if you approach it like to try to use production-ready code, it's something that like you can actually use on your project when you go to build. So that's really cool. And then this link is just like a bunch of templates that have different layouts that you can kind of look through and start with. And so that's why we kind of trended towards a front-end framework. But why we chose Foundation. First off, it's mobile first. At the time, Bootstrap wasn't mobile first yet, and I mean, Bootstrap and Foundation get compared a lot, but I've kind of found like they're both UI kits, but I've kind of found that Bootstrap kind of gives you everything, and you can kind of start to build where Foundation gives you the groundwork, the foundation. But it's mobile first. It's totally flexible and customizable with the grid system. We're going to go more into that, but it ships with like a small and a large grid, and there's also a medium grid. There's a little asterisk by there because in Foundation 4 you have to import it in. It's not just like part of the default. Also, so you can design in the browser, which is faster. You can decide which components get used, so you don't have to load the entire like Foundation CSS file. You can kind of pick and choose like what components you're actually using and comment out the main CSS file and just kind of decide what you really want. It's the resources for rapid prototyping. It's also you can still use semantic code and leverage foundation. You're going to kind of see with like the row classes that I'm talking about, like what that is and how you get around having to speak foundation. You can bend it to your will, kind of. It works really great with SASS and Compass. And anybody need like a quick 30-second background on SASS? Yeah, okay, cool. SASS is a preprocessor. It's a CSS preprocessor. And it's basically, you can write in a .sass or .scss file. There's different tab, like the white space is different for the two of those. But basically, like you write in SASS, and then it goes to a preprocessor, and it spits out CSS. And the reason that you write in this preprocessor is you get all these new features, like you can do global variables that you can reference throughout the project, and you can do mixins that you can repeat, and also extends. And there's an extend is like a style that you can use in multiple places, but like extend it, like add, like maybe you'll have like a base button file, but you want to add other styles onto it. So it has just a bunch of like really cool features that you can't do in SASS. I mean, you can't do in CSS. And Compass is a CSS meta framework, which is just a ton of different mixins that you can use on your project that makes writing code a lot faster. And also it ties in with Drupal, and there's some modules for it. So, like I said, you don't have to use the whole enchilada. This screen is actually like, if you go to foundation.zurb.com and you just want to download it, not like the Drupal base theme, but just like Foundation on its own. This is how you can like customize what you get. So like if you just wanted to use the grid, like you're building a lot of responsive sites, and you've heard good things, you could just download the grid, not worried about the buttons or anything else. You can also kind of like define your own like color, your own custom color palette. So let's get started with how you just like set up a Drupal foundation site. And we're going to use this base theme called Zurb Foundation. There are like multiple examples like in the community. One other popular one is called Zoundation. They both do really similar things. This one had kind of more activity on it. It's used a little bit more widely. It also has like it has an experimental Drupal 8 theme for it. Like 6 months ago, they tried to port. Like, have you seen this one? They tried to port it over to Drupal 8 in Twig. I actually tried it yesterday. We were in like this all-day Twig session, which was awesome. But like this was from 6 months ago, and like enabling it white screen the site. But it's cool that like they do have like the template like stubbed out, and it's going to be there like when we go to Drupal 8 too. These are the docs for just like how you use all the different components. There is like the newest version is Foundation 5, and we're going to be talking about Foundation 4. Just because that's the recommended release of this Drupal base theme, like, and that's what we're using on all of our like production sites. There are some subtle differences, but like for our purposes, we're going to talk about Foundation 4. So what do you get when you just, like go to D.O and download this base theme? First off, you get the base theme that you're kind of working off of. And that's kind of like what you don't want to change. That's like it comes with this base theme, and then there's the starter folder inside the theme. You want to pop out that starter theme, put it with the rest of the themes, and enable that, and that's what you're going to customize. Because I think one like really cool, like not as well, or like I feel like it's sometimes like confusing as far as like what you're using from Foundation is like people think that if they're using like Foundation that it has to look like Foundation and you can't customize it. But I mean, with this starter theme, you can go to town. You can do whatever you want. You can kind of roll your own based off of this. Oh, it also comes with like the SASS and Compass files. So it's like the config.rb, which is basically just like how Compass gets all its configuration, all its settings. You tell it like where your SAS folder is and where your CSS folder is. A gem file, which is like, it tells you all the different versions. It tells you the version of the different Ruby gems that you're using. It locks it in, so if like there's an update to it, your site's not going to break. And also, there's a little bit more about that. We'll get to it a little bit later. It also comes with a commented template.php preprocessor function, like preprocessor functions that kind of give you, kind of subs out like the idea of what else you can do with it, because I mean, you're really trying to make Drupal speak foundation. That's really the challenge of using this base theme, and template.php preprocessor functions are one of the ways to do that. It also comes with modular folder structure that's already mapped out, and it uses, it's not SMAX, but it's like a version of SMAX, and it's kind of like based off of SMAX. And for if you don't know, SMAX is scalable modular architecture with CSS. Jonathan Snook book came out a couple years ago, and it comes with foundation icons. So like actually like icon fonts with like social icons like Facebook, Twitter, but also just like general purpose ones that I found to use like pretty often, and a ton of JavaScript components. Orbit image slider is one of them, but we'll go through a lot of the really useful ones. And this is what you need to get started with it. PHP 5.3, jQuery update, which is a module, and then you have to basically enable this jQuery update module and set it to at least 1.7 or above. And also, it runs off of, like I said, all these different Ruby gems. But you only have to do this one time. So there, and also if you don't like working in the command line, there's a lot of really good GUI applications for it. Like CodeKit is really good. It's paid, but it's cheap. It's like 20 bucks. So that's instead of having to go in the command line, you'll do this. You have to do this for these 3 different pieces. So for SAS, you have to install the Ruby gem, and if it doesn't work, you might have to sudo gem install SAS and Compass. And then this Zerb Foundation one is basically so like I said, Compass is a meta framework, so you can build frameworks off of Compass. So Zerb built this foundation Compass meta framework that runs off of Compass, and you can build a lot of cool custom things. And then they recommend that you use Bundler if you wanted to use Foundation 4 and Foundation 5 and do all this other stuff. You should, instead of just doing it like this, you go through Bundler, and then you can use multiple versions of Foundation. This is the modular structure that I was talking about. So you've got your base, which is your common SAS file, and these are all this little underscore before the file is what's called a partial. So all these different files, they compile into this custom. Well, they're all imported into this custom SAS file and then compiled into a custom.css file. That's what's kind of going on here. This kind of comes to you like this. This is the folder structure of the starter kit SAS folder. So this is what you can customize as much as you want. So it's not very opinionated. It has this folder structure, and it tries to break things. It tries to kind of force you to put all of your button styles in a buttons SAS file. But you have to kind of make a conscious effort to actually put your styles there. And then the kind of idea is that this custom.css, in a perfect world, this wouldn't be this 2,000-line messy CSS file, but it's a table of contents that tells you where to find other stuff. So if you're looking for all the typography that you're loading in from Typekit, that would be in type, and you can find it really quickly. So just as an example of these are pretty lightweight. There's not like hundreds of lines of code. Like this one comes with like 4 different properties, the Drupal one. And so basically just like, there's this thing in Foundation called top bar that we'll look at that kind of loads your menu for you and it makes it responsive. But it's like this base theme kind of, all of the things that don't play very well with Foundation and Drupal, it tries to kind of make an effort to standardize that stuff so things don't look broken. So like the admin menus like in the right spot, and like your modals are showing up above your content, they're not getting hidden. That mcalc thing is a function, which is really cool. Like it's basically a function that calculates your, this is actually, it should be, so it's like 29 pixels. If you just put 29 in it, it would work, but it allows you to basically think in pixels, but still use ems. So you're still using like a relative form of measurement for like all of your padding and spacing and fonts. But you don't have to like bust out the calculator and do it every time. Like you can still think in pixels, and then it calculates that measurement based off of your base font size. So what does it look like out of the box? This is just like, you've enabled your theme, you've enabled your starter theme that has your base theme. And the reason I like to show this is that like sometimes when you use a front-end framework, there's kind of this like fear that it's not gonna, like it's gonna have, everything's gonna look the same and like you're not gonna be able to customize it the way that you want to, but you're really still starting with very little. So you have like the top bar, which is just the navigation menu at the top. It's using the main menu. And like the search button has the button styles, but you can obviously make that whatever you want. And we have like this project that we use on like every new site that has a lot of different pre-configurations. And so I'm showing you like the like what you would download from D.O as the Zerp Foundation base theme. But like you can go to town on what it looks like when you enable your starter theme. So so we'll put like a min height for the content. So like the first time that you go to the site, the footer's not like up in the middle of the page. Just like little things like that that make a big difference if you add them up. It also comes with all these different custom theme settings. So I'm showing you the top bar one. So this is basically saying if you're using it or not. And also Foundation has a ton of different classes that make it really easy to like play with the grid. So there's this checkbox that would just add this contain to grid style. So like you can see that right now like the top bar is all the way across the page, but if you enabled this like contain to grid checkbox, it would be 62.5 ems is what their layout starts as, but whatever you define like the max width of your page, that's what that contain to grid checkbox does. And also there's that sticky checkbox which makes the top bar just stick to the top of the page all the time. And there's like a drop down menu, which is, we'll see that in a second. So like I said, like the challenge is like you have this Foundation framework and it can do a lot of cool things, but you want to use all the cool stuff that's in Drupal, so you need to make them understand each other, and getting all these Foundation classes on your layout is kind of like, it's like what's in front of you is what you're trying to do. And there's different ways to go about it, right? So you can create like specific templates and build those classes into the templates for as granular as you need to for pages and nodes and views and blocks. And that's kind of how I typically think about it. Like I'll like start with like the TPL file, and like you're gonna build like your basic grid out there, and then let's start that general sense, and then like just specifically as you need to drill down, you will in those like as you build out other pages. Like I said, you can also use these preprocessor functions. You can do a lot with that, and also display suite. which actually we haven't even been using on projects, but it was something that I found recently that I just thought was cool to show in case like you guys like using Display Suite. And also for clients, like when you're building on a site, and so maybe it's more complex than just a two-column page every time you build out a site. You want to give them this like control to be able to build their own 3-column pages. And there's like a brick, like you can, there's like a brick layout where it's like the first like section is like a 12-column grid, and then there's like a 3-column, and there's another 1-column. Like there's really complex layouts that you can build out in Display Suite. And there's a lot of control with that in the base theme. We'll go over that a little bit more. So now what I really want to do is go through all of the different like components that you have in Foundation, and like because there's not only like you can, if you really wanted to, you can't really, because if you're hard coding everything, you're losing the power of Drupal. Like you're not going to be able to give it to someone and have them edit it if everything is just in a template and it's not editable. So there's different like modules to be able to use all these cool features in Foundation, and we're going to kind of go through all those. So first is the grid. All right, so like I said, Foundation 4 out of the box includes a small and a large grid. Grids are nestable, which means that like you can build layouts inside layouts basically, and every time you're building a new grid in this like row class, like you can have a 12-column grid inside of another 12-column grid, and you can make your layouts as like complex as you need them to be. And the idea, though, is that you put everything in a grid row. And like I said, like this doesn't have to be, like, so right now this is a div class of row. Like, if you think that, like, if that bugs you, like, if you don't want all these row classes on all of your, like, container divs, like, it doesn't have to be that. Like, you can, we'll show you how to, like, you can use these SASS MIXINS to have semantic markup and call it whatever you want. But if, just like when you're working out of the box, it's a div class of row to like start building out these grids. And this is kind of what the grid looks like. So you try to visualize it. So you have a 12-column grid, and like everything that you build out is going to add up to 12. So if you wanted a 3-column layout, these different, like you would, this first one would be 4, middle one would be 4, third one would be 4. And there's also like, I mean, and you can kind of go to town on that. There's obviously like a lot of combinations, but you also have these other classes that work with the grid system. So there's like these push and pull classes. So if you want to play with like source ordering in responsive, excuse me, and you did like, you would do, I'll show you like a small, that's the next one. So like if you wanted to push something, like, so say the first column, you want it to be at the end. You want to swap them like on like mobile or on like your small grid. When you push something, so say you pushed it 4 columns, it would go to the middle. Or if you pushed it 8 columns, it would go all the way to the right. Or if you pulled it, you'd pull that like third 4, like the first, like in this first row, the column of 4, like if you pulled it, you can make it go the other way. So you can kind of swap your content without changing the markup. And it's really powerful with that. And this is just like if you're adding in that medium grid that is baked into Foundation 5 but not Foundation 4 yet, this is like an import file of that Foundation compass thing that we imported earlier. Like this is one of those components. So if you want to use the grid, that's how you pull it in. And this is the grid with Display Suite. So like I said, like this is how many different layouts that you get just for like turning the theme on. And you can build as many other ones that you want. Like each one has its own template file. And it gives you this little preview of what it looks like. Like this is the really standard 2-column one. So it also gives you top bar. And this is kind of just to give you an idea of like what this looks like in Drupal. Like this obviously isn't, and this is just like in like the page.tpl file. Like this is what it's going to start to look like in Drupal. But this is what it just does by turning it on. And so like you would add your different menu items to your main menu, and then like auto-magically or with the small grid, that like when you scale it down and you run out of room, that becomes this menu with the hamburger icon, and then like if you click on the hamburger icon, it'll display it like for mobile. And there's obviously like a lot of different like navigation patterns. Like you might not just want a hamburger menu that scrolls down. Like you might want to go off canvas, which is like when it slides off the page and then comes back. But like Foundation has all of those different navigation patterns with classes that you just have to match up your menus in those containers to your classes. And also, like I said, you don't have to use these, and you're going to want to customize what they look like, but these are what the buttons look like when you're calling them. So like you can either use a class of button or just like the button element, and it's going to start to pull in these different Foundation styles. And there's like this, you can use it for sizes. You can also use it for like alerts and success buttons and all this other stuff. Another really cool thing that it can do is interchange. It's a JavaScript component. And so I'm showing you like, this is one image, and depending on a media query or depending on like your browser size, it's going to pull in the image for that window or for that viewport. So this is kind of what that looks like. So you're seeing like instead of like image source, you're using this data attribute of data-interchange. And then if I scroll to the right here a little bit, that's where you're defining like what grid you're calling it for. So here, like you're saying, I'm calling this image for the large grid, and you would do that for each grid size. And like you can also like you don't like Foundation out of the box comes with a small, medium, and large grid, but like not every media query might have an image that that fits exactly for that. So you can like define your own custom ones, like right in like an image tag. So like this one would have a min width of 1, or for like a really like large widescreen site, 1280. And there's a module for this like that does something really cool. Like if you when you had like this image field, so if you're in like the display mode of a content type, and you edit the settings on an image, it just shows you each different style that you would use like for these interchange images, and you can define as many as you want, like I said, like based on like the grid that's there or whatever other styles that you want to add. But the only thing to like kind of be aware of is the order that you put them in is the order it's going to load. So like you want to go smallest to largest, right? So you're not serving up the large image to the small screen. And that's just like for these image settings as you're loading these like responsive images. This is cool because reveal is a modal, and I just used this the other day for like a video overlay, and I was kind of like, there's no dependency other than like you need like the Foundation JavaScript to be loading, which it will do like by default, and this is basically so this is another, like, they're all about these like data attribute tags, right? So this is, so you'd have like data reveal ID of like my modal, and that's just to like call the button that's going to trigger the overlay. And then in the same, like, you can do this just like in, you can do this in a template. It works like in a WYSIWYG if you like go to full HTML, because there's no JavaScript loading. You're just using this data attribute tag. And so you basically like define these IDs, and as long as those IDs match up, as long as it's my modal, whatever you call it, that button will trigger whatever content this is. And that's like what it looks like. But you can style this too. There's also Orbit, which is an image slider, and this is like, I mean, there's a ton of different image slider modules, and I'm like, we have like internal debates like with our team about like if you should be using carousels, and it's like we're trying not to use as many carousels anymore. But the thing that I like about this is for prototyping more so than actually like, because I think that there are a lot fewer use cases for them that really, like if you really had a content strategy and you could decide like the most important thing on the page, it should be probably that thing and not 5 things that sort of cycle through. This is because there's a ton of studies that say like people don't go to the 4th and 5th slides. But like the fact that it's like 4 lines of code like to get this image slider on the page, and this module is really based off of field slideshow, because like just kind of like the interchange thing. Like if you make the field an orbit field, then these images start to cycle in through. Starts to use like this slider, but it's like I said, it's based off of this field slideshow. It's not any fancier than that. And JOYRIDE, which is tours are built into Drupal 8 now. I saw, which is really cool for like we all saw this morning. But Foundation has kind of had this for a while, and the Drupal compatibility isn't as like simple as a lot of the other stuff. Like it's still a lot of work to set up each like step, because using context for this, so like you would each block or each little like pop out would be a block that you put in context and give it like the JOYRIDE class, and then you can kind of cycle through as many steps in a tour, in the feature tour, as you would need to. But so it makes it a little bit easier with this module because you can use context and just add a class to it. But it's not as like the modal where you can just like add a class and it works, and add like a data attribute and match them. But I mean it's a little bit more robust, so it makes a little bit more sense that it is a lot of work. So that's like, and there's like way more things that are in Foundation, but those are the ones that have like specific Drupal module callouts for it that make it a little bit easier to use. But I mean, you can use anything like anything in the docs, like when you build out your site. But those are the ones that are a little bit easier to use in Drupal. So since Foundation is built with SASS, and you can use all this like semantic markup, and you can make it look however you want, I thought it would be helpful to kind of go through just a couple of quick examples of like what you can do with SASS. And so first, like this would be like in your custom, this is in your init partial, which is like all of, so like here you're loading like your variables, you're loading normalize, you're loading the Foundation, like that import right there is like all of Foundation, and then and also Compass. So like, and then below that is each component that you would load. So like, if you commented out that Foundation import and you only wanted to use the grid, you would just comment out Foundation and then uncomment the grid, and then like you have that to use. But this is what a mixed-in looks like for the grid, so you don't have to use that row class everywhere. So you're basically like, so you have a container and you're using a mixin called grid row, and just using that mixin makes it a grid row. But then you also have to like define your columns, right? So if you're using a 12-column grid, like you could, I mean, it could be 9 and 3. I did find that like if you're not great at adding, that like it will fix the grid for you anyway. So if you add it to 14 because you're having an off day and you couldn't count, it will stop. Like it'll like if you went over, it will like subtract it for you and just make it 12 grids. Or if you went under, like if you added up to 10, it will basically just float everything in the farthest right grid column to the right. So you don't even have to add. And this is cool too. It's if you guys ever used something, it's called breakpoint. It's kind of it's just like really simple media queries in your CSS or in your SAS. And this isn't breakpoint, but it's really similar to it. So basically here, like, so by default, this is what the size of each grid is, small, medium, and large. And if you wanted to change, like universally change it, it's one variable that you would change here. And then like, so since it's a variable, like you can use it to call to make, like when you actually have, when you're actually making like media query calls. So this is the variable for the size is the first one, and then the second one is like actually using the media query. And then so the third example is what it looks like when you're putting it in, like when you're making your styles. So instead of having to like write out that second code snippet every time, you use the third thing. So like you're using just for the small grid, this is like the style that you want to happen. And then there's also like a ton of resources for this, like just for learning it. The kitchen sink is like every single element. I put the slides like on MidCamp too. Like you can on midcamp.org on my presentation. Like you can download like the PDF of all this stuff. Like if you want the links. But this is basically, I mean, it's a UI kit, right? So it's every single component that's in the system. Yeah, sure.
Before you go too far, on that last slide, you said you have multiple at media queries. Why would you have multiple at media queries?
Well, so like if you wanted styles only to be like for mobile, like so then you'd be targeting the small grid. So like say you wanted a button to be 100% on like your mobile screen. That's when you would target the small like variable and say like a width of 100%. But then like on like your large grid, like that 100% button like looks kind of funny. So that's when you would actually like change the width to whatever you want it to look like for like the desktop version.
Okay, you wouldn't just take all the min width and everything you have up there and just put it that medium for small. Like it just seems like it's extra work to make a variable for it.
Oh, sorry. So these come like pre-stock. Like you don't have to write this. You only have to write the third thing. And the only time that you would change, like this second code snippet, is just kind of showing you what's there for you to use. So I might have been a little unclear about that. The first one is like you can override like what's there. The second one is showing you this like mixin, right? So or sorry, this global variable. And then the third one is actually using it. Does that make sense? And then, so there's the kitchen sink. There's Try Foundation, which kind of just like makes you build out each like UI element. There's Pattern Tap, which is just like contributed foundation stuff that you can use. And there was this like whole conference in New York that I went to last October, just on SAS. Yeah, important. And this is Caleb Winters, who did just like a full-on demo of just all the different, like how I just like showed you like this media query mixin. You kind of went through every single variable that you can override in Foundation to like make your own stuff. So it's a really cool video. And one last thing I want to show you guys, and then we'll do questions. Can do that. This is just like the kitchen sink. Oh, I got a presentation mode. There we go. So it's like all these different like alert boxes and the block grid, which is it's basically like a horizontal list based on a grid. So you would say like a block grid of 4, and then when you shrink it down, it stacks. Like so, this would be like the large media query. This is small, and that's all they got there. But there's a ton of stuff here, like breadcrumbs and split buttons, forms. But you can kind of check it out and see what else is there. Yeah, you can open up. Any questions? Sure.
Can you show us a couple of production sites that you've made with this?
Sure.
And I have a follow-up question.
Oh, you're setting up the trap.
No, not
Yeah, no, there's a lot of different.
Like it's you know, I mean, it's the same question I asked the guys who did the Bootstrap presentation.
Yep.
So I'm channeling a friend who would say something. I'm channeling you know.
Snowden?
What? So yes, I'm channeling Sam.
All right. He's not a fan of Foundation. Yeah.
No, well, no. I mean, I'm not as vehement as he is, but you know, how much of your time is spent overriding Zurb itself? You know, and how much of Zurb's preset defaults do you end up using? You know, in the production side, that is.
So I pulled this up. This is one of our clients, Zebra Technologies, and they have this app called Zatar. And this is all Foundation. Like, this is, you can kind of like see, this is actually all done in panels, which is really more because of the client editing part of that. We typically don't build panel sites, but the requirements kind of made it so it kind of worked out really well to use them.
Why you guys don't normally use panels?
We try to put as much stuff.
That's actually the thing I really don't get. I mean, when I first figured out panels for wheels and how to actually how to control the theme layer panels, then you kind of, I've been a big fan of the Space Reader, very deep involved in it with Central for a long time. You've been like, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And at some point, you almost just had like a call line. But where panels, it opens up the door for so much epic customization that it's completely mind-blowing.
Agreed. Yeah. So wait, what was the last question?
The amount of override that you have.
Yeah.
The criticism from us who is like on the, we are holier than thou, we don't rewrite our own thing, is, but you're going to use so much time on overriding their defaults. That's my issue with Bootstrap, is it is not a system, it's a design that you then have to redesign, and that was made me, I mean, I've worked with one client that insisted on using Bootstrap, but it ended up in a mess, because we used one thing is controlling Drupal, and then you have to control Bootstrap, then you end up with this gigantic mess of what did we do here?
Right.
But it seems like Foundation is more like, okay, we understand that, we don't want to force you to override everything.
Yes, yeah, it's a little bit cleaner. Like, so I would say like there's some specificity issues. Like that is the bigger problem than like override problems. Like if so say like for this, like this is actually a bad example. Like if I just want to show you a button. Like this is just a Foundation button. Like you would build out that style you would build out a button style anyway. But it kind of it looks like what I showed you, like the out of the box like blue button with like a shadow. And so like sometimes you do have to like cancel out there's not a lot of like box shadows. Like they try not to get too fancy with it. That's really like straightforward styles most of the time. But I mean, like the same work that you go into building out something custom in a button it's really similar. And like I said, like there are sometimes specificity issues. Ryan, who I work with, found that when he was working with Superfish, like for drop-down menus, that was kind of a nightmare because you're working with two kind of different frameworks. Like Superfish has classes on everything, and that's you have to override Superfish, and there's also some foundation overrides. So when you add on even more complexity of like something else that has classes, like that can be a problem. But on its own, it's pretty simple. Like, but as far as it tries to give you very bare styles and then go over that.
To that effect, though, so I mean, beyond Satar, for your average site that, well, not average, for the site that you're producing with Foundation, how much of your time, you say on average, is resetting Foundation itself?
So you know how I was talking about, like, we had this like pre-configuration base theme. We did all that once, so we can try to like do as many resets as we need to. And then there's also like this Git repo that anytime that we find something that we're doing over and over again, we can commit to that. And then, so especially like we have that kind of mentality, and even see that like we're trying to reuse as much as possible. And so whenever we do find stuff like that, we try to commit it to this like universal project that we use to roll every site. So I mean, you definitely run into stuff that you have to reset, but it's not as like tangled as you might think. Like is like something even like Bootstrap, which gives you even more UI components.
So one thing is that it seems like there's a lot of SASS, sorry, I just jumped in, there's a lot of SASS stuff built in, and that is kind of where like, man, I don't see the big thing. I use Singularity instead because it's just epic power. But it's a little bit more complicated to get it in first. That with breakpoints begins to be like sexy as fuck. But it seems like there's a lot of JavaScript stuff that goes in.
Yeah.
How well does that, because that's normally like one of the like headaches. Like getting that into Drupal can end up being this configuration nightmare, preprocessors, adding the right classes, breaking to dark gods kind of approach. So it's more like how does that work with Drupal? Because that I would see that as like a quick win. Like, okay, let me just take the JavaScript that Foundation provides. So I don't have to do that, but the design implementations, I can control the way I want to.
Yeah, like that's, so the function is like where the JavaScript takes care of the function of like a modal popping up, right? And so I haven't gone too much far as extending the functionality of that. Like, so maybe you wanted it to like have a different effect when it popped up. That I haven't dove too deeply into, but using it just to get like your modal on the page and then overriding it with styles is kind of like how we typically use it. And then you're right, like it might be a lot of work to like if you had this really specific like idea of what how that modal was going to work, you might not want to use the reveal modal. But that also doesn't mean that you can't use other like plugins for like with Foundation. Like you don't always have to use like reveal for the modals. You can use whatever you want. And Singularity is really cool. I did a whole workshop with Sam on that, and it's really powerful. And I'm kind of blown away by the project and how, because Singularity is this project where you can basically, so instead of having this grid framework that you use and it's 12 columns, you create your own grids. And it gives you like this really fine-tuned, like the layout can be as custom and specific, like you build the grid yourself. So that's like the other side of the spectrum, like to have that control. Go ahead.
So I'm kind of new to grid systems for CSS. What happens with responsive design when the browser shrinks down, the viewport gets smaller? Do you still have 12 tiny little columns? Or do you, at some point, can you use media queries to break that up to force, if it's small-4, can that just go full screen?
So if you wanted it to be full, it would be like large 12, small 12.
Right. But how would you code that in the class to allow that to be responsive? That after your medium breakpoint, instead of being a column cell, it goes to be full screen. Or is that done in Foundation?
Well, I guess that is done in Foundation, like the way that you're describing it. So like you. So you have like the grid, right? And so if you wanted it to be 100% width of something, you wouldn't use a row class at all, right?
No. I mean, I don't want it to be 100% wide in a desktop view or a larger viewport. But as you're getting down to a phone, like there's sometimes that the individual columns don't work, and you want that to collapse upon themselves and just
Yeah, you want to push the sidebar down under the main content.
Right. So first, a lot of grid systems, you attach the container to a class. You give a container class, and then you have media queries below that say, at this media query, you have a 12-column grid. At this media query, you have a 4-column grid. At this media query, you have a 1-column, single-column grid.
Right.
And then you attach behaviors to as you indent in your SASS, to each individual element, saying, okay, this is a sidebar here, but this is a float here, and this is a single column in this order here.
Okay. Is that cooked into Foundation, or is that something you have to
Yes.
export yourself?
No.
That's when if you go into singularity, that's when you can do that most amazing thing, because you control basically everything inside the grid, and you create them on the fly. And when you begin to do that, it's like, okay, now I don't want to have my 12 grid, I want to have an 8.5 grid. And when you go to like 8.5 grid, what's that? Well, that just looks better. Well, we're just going to create it and build that. Like, okay, you can do that. Because singularity is a math machine. It just does all the math, so you don't have to think anymore. Especially me as a designer, like, I'm done. So I don't have to like figure out 12 minus 9, that's 4, kind of that way. So singularity adds in, all they do it with class names, the same thing I said.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really similar, but it's not a half. It's always going to be a grid, and a grid column, and you can change the width of those columns, but.
So the trick is the container, it's no longer a 12-column container, it's now a 4 or single row.
Or
column.
7-column, whatever.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Usually it'll say, like, below, say, 600 pixels width, it'll shut off the floats on all the columns, and it will say width of 100%.
Yeah.
At least on the ones I use, I'm not familiar with it. So
I've done that manually, but I just on things like this.
I don't know if it's built in.
Yeah, no, it's built into Zerp too. Yeah. Ryan?
To add to that, since it's mobile first, like if you have a div and you only specify like large 12, it will only be 12 column on your large screen size.
Right. Cool.
Does it support SASS syntax, not just SCSS, but also SASS?
Not this version of it. Actually, that's a good question. Do you use like SASS, the SASS syntax?
It's less, no brackets or semicolons.
All the documentation is CSS. I've never tried changing it to .sass and seeing what happens. It might work.
And does it require gen being installed on the server?
No. Well, kind of our deployment process is like work locally and then compile to CSS, and then so it doesn't matter. You're going to deploy the CSS files. Cool.
Does Drush know about it?
Does Drush know about it? There is a Drush file, but that's like you can create foundation projects with Compass, and there's like some Drush commands that automate that. But that's the extent of what I've used Drush for foundation.
Was your picture loader, was it Lotus?
Yep.
Was that built so that it was easier to use the picture and breakpoints?
Like the interchange.
Yeah, to deliver concise photos.
Yeah, they're kind of similar because they're both field formats. So it's like an image field with settings. You would change that to the orbit one, and so there's like the checkboxes for where you would upload the image. And then so for orbit, it's kind of similar. It's another image field with a setting of orbit on it. And so you would put that all in one container, and you can cycle through as many images as possible. So the complexity of setting it up is pretty similar between orbit and interchange. I would say JOYRIDE is the one that's the most involved out of all of them. Cool. Thanks, guys.